Hello, good evening, namaste, and welcome all of you to this evening's conversation with Vinay Ji. So please say hello and leave your comments so that we know you are here. And while you do that, let me just begin to introduce myself. My name is Shailaja Menon, and I have been in the field of yoga for 20 years now. I began my yoga journey in Coimbatore, India, with integral yoga, and continued here in Malaysia with my teacher Manoj Kaimal. I run my own yoga studio, Mat and Beyond, here in Malaysia. So I began these conversations during the lockdown to share authentic information about yoga, Ayurveda, and Vedanta, as I truly believe that our ancient wisdom holds the key to living our life at our highest potential. As Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, you have to lift yourself by yourself. And having this knowledge, the right knowledge, is the key to that highest unfoldment in every area of our life. And what better way to transform the lockdown into a period of growth and evolvement? So, on a personal note, Vinayji has also been my Vedanta teacher for many years now during the time that he spent in Malaysia, teaching Vedanta classes both at my yoga studio and at my home. So, I can truly say that he exemplifies the spirit of the Shastras that he teaches, having entered the spiritual arena at the tender age of 16 and continuing with his sadhana till this date, from waking up at 4 a.m. every morning for the last 30 years to living the scriptures in his everyday dealings. Let me just introduce Vinayji formally. Vinayji is an established philosopher, thinker, and self-management expert. He plunged into full-time study of Vedanta at an early age of 16. His teachings are backed by over 30 years of full-time study and research to practical application in day-to-day living. His inspiring oration translates complex Vedic principles into simple practical tools for living. His appeal lies in his presentation of these truths with absolute precision, effortless ease, and consummate wit. His tireless work in India and abroad has captivated and inspired people to commit themselves to a higher ideal and transform their lives to be more purposeful. His multitasking abilities, combined with his devotion, dedication, and commitment, has comprehensively laid the wisdom foundation. Being an athlete, he regularly participates in marathons besides a daily schedule of yoga and badminton. He has a passion for mountain trekking, and his recent trip was a 9-day trek in Nepal to the famous Annapurna Base Camp. Above all, Vinayji stands as a testimony to youth for dynamic living of higher values. So, before we go into the questions, I'd just like to announce that Vinayji is actually announcing his North America lecture series, The Essence of Various Scriptures Distilled into a 5-part interactive live lecture session. So it's called The Eternal Wisdom, A Manual to Life. And the details of this will be shared in a slide at the end of the talk. Yeah, so those of you who are interested can just make a note of this and continue to listen, look for it at the end of the talk. And so welcome, Vinayji. It is truly our honor to have you here with us again and share your wisdom, gathered over so many years of profound, contemplation and meditation. So this is a very special session on the art of parenting because it is based not on individual opinion, but guided by eternal wisdom from the scriptures of the Shastras. So let's begin with the first quest. Actually, when does parenting begin? Right? So is it in the womb or after the child is born? And if it is in the womb, what can the expecting parents do for their unborn child?
Right. Thank you, Shailaja, for the
Over
kind
to you.
words, and so happy to be back again in conversation with you. And yes,
Absolutely.
the subject matter is very intriguing, very challenging for any parent, And at the offset, I would like to get it straight. Even though I've been involved in philosophy for so many years, you would appreciate, you all would keep in mind that I am also a parent. So it resonates very, very well, all what I speak, all what I learn, and it has to be put into one's own life. No point just talking of these ideas if you don't live by them. So it is certainly demanding, but the knowledge and the clarity and the wisdom paves way for a happy parenting. Okay, so the question you're asking is, when actually does parenting begin? Does it begin in the womb, or when does it actually start? See, I would actually say parenting begins much, much before you become a parent. When I say much, much before, why I say that is, parenting is just another role you play. You can be a good parent only if you are a good human being, isn't it? I can play a role perfectly if I have perfected that art of living itself. So even before I become a parent, I should attempt to becoming a perfect human. And if that happens, I would say that parenting should be actually a spillover. Well, all parents would really want that to happen, isn't it? Because it's a very, very challenging task being a parent. But science, and also when you look back in history, go into the Puranas and stories, it is very clearly proven that the child in the womb, by the 18th week itself, it starts registering certain sounds or inputs from the external world. So yes, you have to be very, very conscious, very, very careful as to what inputs, what stimuli you're given to the child, isn't it? In fact, there's a beautiful saying that a child comes out whistling if the mother spends all her pregnancy in partying. Imagine the mother has led that kind of a life. The child will come out whistling. So obviously it has had an impact on the child in the womb. In fact, there is this episode in Mahabharata we all have heard. I don't know how right I would get that story. And Lord Krishna was actually talking to Subhadra. And Lord Krishna was actually talking about how to get in and come out of the Chakravyuha. The Chakravyuha was the most impenetrable military formation. And that could have been a very pivotal strategy win for the Pandavas to win the battle. And Abhimanyu was Arjuna's son. So he was narrating it. And the story goes, Abhimanyu, who was in the womb, in the mother's womb of Subhadra, was actually heeding all that.
Hearing it.
And midway, the mother slept off and he only heard half of the thing. So the story goes, he only knew how to get into the Chakravyuh.
Go in, he couldn't come out.
Isn't it? So science has proven it. History has said it long, long ago that parenting begins right from the womb. But in order to be a qualified parent, I would say one needs to be a qualified or a perfect human being. Now, that very quality or the very definition of perfection is a very vague, very broad, but someone who strives to be perfecting oneself, there is a long, long way to go. And I believe there's a long way to go for me to being or becoming a perfect human being. So it's a direct reflection. Now, also, what are some things that expecting parents or parents should understand? See, as we understand that a body takes 9 months to form, is it 9-10 months? Because they say how you argue with it, 9 months plus. But it takes 15 years for the mind and intellect to be born. That's when a human being truly matures wholesomely. So a parent should understand this and should be responsible for the entire wholesome maturity of a human being, not just the physical growth, but the mental and intellectual growth, to the extent the child becomes self-sufficient, is able to feel their emotions, generate those emotions wholesomely from the mind, and also make those critical, rational decisions with the intellect. So you have to have, I think, keep that in mind generally. Okay.
So it's a whole range.
It's not, in fact, it's a lifetime commitment, if you ask me. But a human being evolves, as we say. For a boy, they perform the thread ceremony. They call the Dvijottama,
Correct.
twice born, as I say. So it's symbolic of maturity of a girl. It all happens around the same age, which is referring to the entire evolution of
Correct. So
a human being fully evolves, twice born. Are you with me, Shailaja?
yeah, just really sorry, some Wi-Fi issues, I think. Anyway, I really hope we can continue with the conversation without too much problem. And just want to say hello. So many well-known names and so many well-known faces here. So there's a lot of people. There's my aunts there, Indira and Chandrika. There's Minnie. And there's my cousin Prakash. There's Ignatius' uncle, as always. He's already got a question. There's my friend Shanti. There's Krishnaveni, who used to be a student here. So, welcome all of you, and just type in your questions. We hope to make this really interactive. So, please, given you, I'm sure all of you are parents here, so please put in your comments and your learning in your parenting journey as well, and do make this as interactive as possible. So, we have some really interesting questions. So, I'm just going to go ahead with it. So, a popular paradigm is that of control. And so, do parents understand what exactly are our role and responsibilities as parents?
I am
Could you
actually
get that,
experiencing
Vinay?
a little internet streaming from you. I think there is this intermittent streaming. Is there something
Okay.
that you could resolve at your end?
Um, I think right now it looks okay. So I think we just go with it and see how it goes.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. So a popular parenting paradigm is that of control. So do parents own their children to do as they please? And what exactly are our roles and responsibilities as parents?
Now, I don't think can Shailaja, I'm just looking at the chat. Somebody is just commenting that the voice is not clear. Is the voice
Yeah.
clear from my end, or is it only from
Can
Shailaja's
somebody
end?
just give some feedback, please, on whether you can hear us? Uh, there is no feedback coming right now. Maybe we just continue, Vinay, and see how it goes. Yeah, okay, so there's feedback coming saying that it's clear.
It's clear. Okay, okay. Very dear student friend Gunalan. Yeah, nice to have him here. Okay, my voice is clear. Okay, let's see. Please keep giving in your feedback, and if for any reason we need to fine tune our transmission, we'll have a look at it. So the question is for those who have not caught: do parents own their children? Isn't it? To do as they please, or what exactly is the role and responsibilities of parents? So I don't think it's possible for anyone to own anyone, isn't it? Much less one's own children. But Khalil Gibran, in fact, a Persian poet, he puts it very, very beautifully. He says, a child is like an arrow. The destination is the infinite path which has already been set, and a parent is just like that arrow, or the bow rather. The parent is the bow. So what the parent has to do is just to release the bow hold the arrow and release the bow, and the direction is set, the destiny is set. You are just an instrument. That's about all, isn't it? What have you got? You can't claim anything as yours in it. Now, just to quote him, and these are his words, he says, "Your children are not yours. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing by itself. They come through you, but not from you." These are the beautiful words. He says, they come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. For they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls. You are the bows from which your children, as living arrows, are sent forth. So this is the analogy, Khalil Gibran. Nothing is mine in this, and I instantly fell back on this beautiful excerpt. And very interestingly and very beautifully, in fact, if you think from it from a philosophical perspective, it is not the parents that choose the child. In fact, it is the child that chooses the parentage. That may come as a shocking to some people, but philosophy Vedanta says it's the child that has chosen you. So none can claim that the child belongs to me and I have an ownership or own the child. In fact, it's the other way around. Perhaps, if at all, it is the child that owns the parentage. So not many think like that, So that, as far as the aspect of owning, I don't think anyone can own. Every human being is independent in this world. But when it comes to roles and responsibilities, I would think the most important role a parent can play is just to be a role model. That's the biggest role a parent can play in a child's life. Can a parent become a role model for the child? And if you have achieved that, you have achieved the real art of parenting. Now, I have a few points, but one of the most prominent I would mention to begin with, the moment a child is born, right from a very young age, every child has a very unique identity, a very unique nature. What it is known as swadharma. Swa means one's own, dharma means nature. So it is the duty of every parent to identify what is the very nature of that child. And there's also something known as paradharma, which is not your nature. So it is important that the parents must understand, identify what is that nature the child is born with. It is not that the child is cultivating, he is born with it, and that is being exhibited from a very young age. And it is imperative that the parent understands this idea or this concept, and the parent must make or pave way so that the child is being given the environment which he is designed for. In Sanskrit or philosophical terms, in Vedantic terms, it's called every human has what is known as a vasana. So you have a vasana for certain things. Now you can have a vasana, you can be a musician, you can be into art, you can be into literature, you can be into politics, you can be into philosophy, you can be into medicine, you can be into interior designing, it could be anything. Now that is known as your innate nature. And in fact, to back it up, what the Shastra says in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a verse which says, Shreyan swadharmo vigunaha paradharmat swanushthitat swadharme nidhanam shreyah paradharmo bhayavaha. In the third chapter of the Gita, he says, Shreyan swadharmo vigunaha. He says, it is better to get into a field of your own dharma, of your own nature. Paradharmo bhayavaha. He says that paradharma, that which doesn't belong to you, is full of fraught with fear. So you should never ever push a child into a field which doesn't belong to the child. It means the child has no passion for. As you said in your little introduction of mine, that my journey started when I was 16. And my accident of discovering my nature it just happened one evening. And indeed eternally grateful to my parents for having allowed me to just explore that sudden discovered interest or passion of mine. It's not that I had pondered over it, I knew it, and I wanted to explore it. No, it just happened as a sudden discovery, and I was very enchanted with that. I wanted to know what this Vedanta is, and all my parents said was, "Go ahead and do what you wish to do." Even though there was a ripple of wave in the family, but they were very clear: whatever you want to do, go ahead and do it. How many parents would do that? In fact, I can recall of a case during the course of my interaction with the audiences. A lady came up to me and she was in tears, very emotional she became. And I said, "Ma, what is it, Ma? Please tell me if I can be of any help." She said, "Guruji, my husband is a very successful surgeon. If I mention his name, you would know in the city." "Oh, is it very nice to hear? But there's nothing nice about it, Guruji." I said, "What happened?" "No, we have only child, we have a daughter, and this man has a very successful business. It's an enterprise. He's running this hospital. It's literally a huge setup he has got. It's like a business, and a huge hospital, a huge setup. And he is pushing her to do medicine so that she takes over the entire setup as time goes by. And I'm torn apart between the daughter and my husband, and I don't know how to help her. And she's going through such a challenge with it, and actually she wants to run away from home. How to salvage the situation? How can I put some sense?" And this is what I told. Perhaps if you can rationalize, you can reason it out, that every child has a unique nature. Imagine taking me out of philosophy and putting me into politics or putting me into business. I will be a failure. In fact, in the very verse, he says, it is better to be unsuccessful in your swadharma than being successful in a field which doesn't belong to you. He goes to that extent. Better to die being unsuccessful. So what you will find is you have a unique, innate nature. You got to be true to yourself. So the most important thing a parent should do is, the most important role is to identify the talent. You should not try to find at your child to fulfill your unfulfilled dreams through them. "Oh, I have never been able to do that. At least I want my child to do that." And you become very unrealistic and you do what you should not. Isn't it? Invariably that happens. So many parents over the years have come and shared this with me. First is that, so identify the nature of a child. That's very, very paramount, very important. You're going to help the child to find out that nature. In fact, I have a procedure, a process, how you sit with a child, help the child decide what is their own nature. It's a process of 2 weeks. Every day the child sits and you help the child analyze it. And this is usually done at the age of 14, 15, because that's when they have a certain maturity to think what field should they choose. Before that, they are immature. They get fascinated with things and they go here and there. They're not certain, isn't it? So identify their talent. Secondly, the role of a parent is to understand education has two facets. It's dual faceted. There is the objective development. There's also the subjective development. You must have knowledge of the world to make a livelihood. You must have knowledge of the subject, the individual, to help live a life itself. So these two essential aspects is a necessity. They have to be taught. So the art of self-management, which teaches how an individual evolves, and that art of science and arts, so that he or she is able to make a living out there. So these two has to be well balanced. Thirdly, there is something very, very important of the value-based education. Every parent should give this value-based education to a child. What I've realized is today's society, there are no feelings and emotions. Today's society has become devoid of feelings for others. Everybody is utterly selfish. They just think of themselves all the time, isn't it? They become inconsiderate towards others' welfare. So much so that the kids today have become inconsiderate towards their own parents. All they want to do is they send them off to the old folks' home. They just pack them up and send them there. So there is no emotion. So one of the most important emotion only this value or this knowledge or this value-based education gives is the most important emotion a child should have and learn is to cultivate that emotion of gratitude. The child must learn to be grateful for the parents and grateful to the teachers. These two people are most powerful influences in molding their life, isn't it? I hope you are with me. Looks like Shailaja Ma has frozen. Oh, I think we have lost her. But if you can just bear with us, she should be back soon. I hope she'll join the same stream. You all can still hear me? Welcome back, Shailaja Ma.
I'm really sorry. I don't know what's going on today.
But now you're very good. You're very clear now.
Okay, we'll just see. Hopefully, this carries on.
So the most important emotion I was mentioning as you just left us was gratitude. And we only know the value of sacrifice of a parent only when one becomes a parent. Till then you have no clue what sacrifices a parent goes through, and to be unmindful of that is like chalk and cheese. You may have all, but if you don't have this gratitude for all what have you received, I think you don't blossom as a human being. So as a parent, it is very important that you nurture and cultivate these essential aspects of that individual development. It's not just objective where you know how to make a living, but you must also know how to give beauty and blossom to your life with these values. If you don't have these values, you don't blossom as a human being. So some of these pertinent points: firstly, you must identify the nature of a child, the talent, the vasanas, the swadharma. Secondly, you must understand the dual aspect education and also the value-based education where a human being blossoms from within. And I can go on, but it's important that you have these in mind as the prominent roles and responsibilities of a parent towards a child. Okay.
So I don't want to go back into it, but I really was. I think one of the most striking points for me was that parents have a responsibility to identify the nature of the child, because I think usually as parents it's the other way around. Like we come with this certain expectation that the child is going to be like this and the child is going to be like that, and we expect the child to fulfill and fit into that expectation that we carry. And we really don't accept the child for who he or she is, and we're always trying to fit that child into our mold. So I think that's a really, really great point. As parents, our responsibility is not our expectation of the child, but truly to see the child for who the child is, to identify the child's nature, and to help that nature blossom, that unique nature of that child blossom. I think that was such a beautiful point. And we just go to the next one. A lot of questions here. I think parenting is a very popular topic. So in case I happen to go off, please take the liberty and just answer all the questions. I think you don't need me here. There are plenty of questions. You can carry the show on your own. But anyway, as long as I'm here, I'm just going to go ahead with it. So the next
No,
question, this again is a
Shalajama,
very
if you go offline, there's no charm in the show, please, huh?
no, 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 not at all. I mean, just God willing, the Wi-Fi
No,
holds. But just in case, there are plenty of
no
questions for
issues.
you.
Yes, 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 yes.
So we move to the next one. Like this again is a very, very important one. This identification or this differentiation actually between love and attachment, right? What is love and how is it different from attachment? Right, because a lot of people in relationship, whether it is adult relationships or parent child relationships, are emotionally manipulated through this word love. Right, if you love me, you'll do this for me. If you love me, you'll pursue this career. If you love me, you'll do so it's really like it's like a bad word actually, because you use it not to support the other person, but to manipulate that person to do what you want that person to do. So just your idea on that.
In fact, you've half answered the very question, because so wisely you have put it, and you bring clarity to that situation. In fact, many people misconstrue attachment to love, and they go about destroying. And in fact, attachment destroys a relationship. So love is a pure emotion. Love is an emotion which is without an expectation. It thinks on in the interest of the other. But attachment is a selfish relationship. So when your emotion of love gets adulterated, it becomes attachment, and that spills into every relationship we have, and no exception to a child. Just for the clarity of it, attachment is nothing but love plus selfishness. When you have an emotion and you
I like that
adulterate it,
equation.
so when you have an equation of love or a feeling with another person with a certain selfishness, it becomes attachment. But love is nothing but attachment minus selfishness. You take out that selfishness from attachment, it becomes pure love. But today, what people have is that there is a relationship that is established in the name of love. It's only a preferential attachment, and wherever there is a preferential attachment, it has a lot of possessiveness, a lot of agony. Wherever there is attachment, wherever there is possessiveness of I and my, it causes a lot of mental worry, it causes a lot of mental agony, isn't it? Wherever there is attachment, there is sorrow and suffering. This is a law of life. Now just take this. When attachment in a relationship is you're thinking on your own part, not on the behalf of the child. There was this actual case that a mother was overseeing a child's preparation for her exam that morning. She was going to write a board exam, and she was with her in the kitchen preparing food for her, and she was attending with a knife cutting some vegetables, and the daughter was there in the kitchen. She was asking some questions. The child fumbled. The child could not answer to the expectations of the mother. The mother got so furious. In that fury, she stabbed her daughter to death.
Oh my God.
This was an actual scenario which was reported in the Indian media, and the papers were flashed. And the interesting thing is the court found the mother not guilty, because she had no intention of killing, because the court only punishes for the intention. The mother had no intention. She was not herself at that moment. The emotions overwhelmed her, and she committed that act. And this today is portrayed as love. This is not love. This is extreme attachment. When the child doesn't cater or fit into your expectation, what does it bring about? It brings about a lot of frustration, a pain and agony. So there's a lot of encashing going on. The parents are encashing the love of the child is encashing the love of the parent, and it's because of your attachment you're constantly pampering them. In the name of love, what you're doing is you're pampering your children in the name of love, and the child keeps demanding, and you give in to their demands. You keep on giving in whatever the child wants. And what happens very sooner, the child becomes I'm sorry to say, a Rakshasa. It just sits and says, I want this, I want that. I remember hearing a case from a parent saying that the daughter will tell the father, I want to eat this ice cream from that particular store, which is 10 kilometers across the city. At 11 o'clock midnight, she says, I want to go there. The same ice cream down the road, you get it, the same shop, the same franchise, the same ice cream, the same flavor, everything same. She says, no, I want to go there. And the father has to dress up and take the daughter all the way there. Buy ice cream for her, comes back. What is going on? In the name of love, are you not giving into the demands? It is literal encashing. In fact, parents have become puppets in the hands of their kids. Just puppets. And all is because the kids are very, very, very smart. And they're encashing your so-called weakness of your attachment to them. So you go through a lot of pain in the name of love. So it is very important to understand the difference between love and attachment. Attachment is selfish and it creates a lot of pain, a lot of agony. Relationship doesn't blossom, but in the only where there's pure love, relationships blossom. So you may have to be firm, but yet you have to be soft. You don't have to be imposing. You have to be cruel only to be kind, as Shakespeare says. You don't have to give in to all the demands. And you will see, as hopefully I'll be able to comment on that. And when you give in to the demands, what happens? It does considerable damage. So this is the fundamental difference people don't understand, and they mess up the relationship. Okay, Shailaja?
Beautiful. I love that formula that you said right at the very beginning. So I think it's important to keep that, keep that in mind. And when we demand something of anyone, we have to see that whether, how much of it is for us and, how much of it is really, for the upliftment of the other person. And I think that goes across all, the spectrum of all relationships, because like I said, in the name of love, we just manipulate emotions. So this is again a very, very important question. I think Ignatius' uncle also had asked something along these lines about mental health, because according to the WHO, I just looked in a few hours ago, close to 800,000 people die of suicide every year, which is one person every 40 seconds. Yeah, these are worldwide statistics, and suicide occurs throughout the lifespan, but is the second leading cause of death among 15 to 29-year-olds globally. So it seems to really strike at that, that young adult, youth, that age group. So another very worrying thing is depression in children and young adults. So how can parents instill self-worth, self-esteem, and resilience in their children in this environment of peer pressure, social media, and all the other challenges they face?
See, it all stems from whether you are leading a life of discipline. So if the parent instills a life of discipline, vis-a-vis there is something called as licentious. Whether you are leading a life of licentiousness or a life of discipline. Today, discipline has all come about in a most unnatural way of how parents impose their authority of superiority over kids in the form of do's and don'ts. This today seems to be the norm of disciplining a child. Good, you say you do it, don't do it. So do's and don'ts, in fact, it is said that do's and don'ts are not actually designed for human beings. It is meant for animals. As a human, you got to lead the way, never show the way. So when, in fact, a famous American politician, poet, thinker, philosopher, the Abraham Lincoln, he says, there is just one way to bring up a child in the way he should go, and that is to travel yourself. If you want a child to go in a particular way, you will have to do it yourself. You will have to go yourself that way. There is no other way. Exactly
Onus
the same.
on the parent.
Onus is on the parents all the while, all the way. And there is a verse in the Gita which says exactly this. Yadyada charati shreshtaha tat tat eva itara janaha sayat pramanam kurute lokas tadanu vartate. So whatever standards you set, that alone others follow. Whatever you do, others emulate. So as a parent, you have to set the right standards. Now, I'm only leading how this affects on the mental state of a child today. Now, why it happens is, as I've said, whatever leader does, you have to lead the way, never show the way. Now, as a parents, I think parents are doing a double mistake. What's a double mistake? The first thing is, we are very good at sermonizing.
Correct.
We keep
Do as I tell you.
them, do as I tell you. So we keep sermonizing, we keep lecturing them, we keep constantly becoming a dictatorship attitude, and we impose on them. Secondly, we don't live that, we advocate them. We don't set the right standards for them. So what happens? I am lecturing to them, at the same time, I don't set the right standards. So what happens? There is an obvious disparity in our own life. And these kids are so smart, they pick it up. So as a result of which, whatever you try to do doesn't have a impact. And thereafter, anything forced is never forceful. It will not work. It will not work. It will not work.
We have to lead the way.
We have to lead the way. So, given that as a parent, we are not able to give them the right direction. Secondly, because of our attachment to our children, we have given in to their demands. What happens? When life doesn't satisfy whatever what you have got used to, you have got into it, whatever you wanted. And when life doesn't give what you want, then comes a challenge. You have not prepared them
to handle it.
You have not prepared them to handle life. So that challenge can come in any form, isn't it? In fact, it is nothing to do, people commit suicide. It is not that they are being challenged or they are the mediocre of the society. No, even the most brilliant children commit suicide. In fact, one of my students shared me this news not long ago, that one of the top students of IIT, he was topping the university. He topped the university right throughout. And he jumped from the balcony, committed suicide. And he had his phone with him when he killed himself. The only son, the father couldn't be controlled, and a very dear friend of his. And he's coming and telling me, what have I not done? I've given him the brilliant child, and yet this chap has committed suicide. That too, you find kids commit suicide. Why? It's because you have not given them the vision of the larger picture of life. You have not told them the panoramic view of life, to take a look at life from a grand stance. You have not taken a life from a grand stance. Every time you are being judged and defined by units and moments of experiences. So if a child is upping for exam, so much pressure that is created, that exam is so pivotal, it determines and defines your life. So, and if the child doesn't do well or doesn't succeed well in the exams, that becomes the roadblock. A child can't say anything beyond that. It's like a chick, it can't see beyond its beak. A chicken's intellect, a small intellect, you can't see beyond. And the child thinks life shrinks to that moment alone. and child commits suicide. So it could be that any external factor. It could come because of your exams, it could be because of a love failure, or because you have lost a job, or it could be a financial problem. It could be anything. But you are not able to realize that this is just a small aspect in the broader picture of life. You have not taught them to understand and look at life from this perspective. So every small thing that daunts them, that really becomes a huge mountain of a challenge, and then depression kicks in. Depression is a state, leading final end is suicide. But depression is a mental state of hopelessness, and it is a modern mental disease. I wouldn't say I wouldn't know how many people, but a lot of people go through this mental disease. You can have all that has gone well with you, you have everything, but yet you will feel empty within. That feeling of emptiness, this is enough to prove that there is no happiness in the world out there. It is all within. With all that is going your way, you will not be happy and peaceful and contented. Wasn't it true that recently one of a young successful Bollywood actor committed suicide in India? He had millions of followers, and yet when he had the challenge, he was all by himself. What's the use? How many people are following you? It's not how popular you're outside. It's not how rich you're, how famous you're outside. How well are you rich inside is important. And we all wake up when there's a alarming situation like this, but then again something else takes over. Rafale, India bought Rafale, everybody's talking of it. Then after, it's Ayodhya. For a few days it comes. We are all caught up in the times. Nobody has time to even ponder on these eternal truths and find a relevance to their lives. So depression is a very serious situation, and that comes in when you can't give in to the mind's demands. And who has started that? A parent, a well-wisher, a benevolent factor has started giving in to the child's demands, and it is the parent themselves are responsible for the depression or the state of the mind of a child. Because I have given in to whatever the child has wanted, and tomorrow when something the child wants doesn't come her way or his way, it's too much for them to handle. So who is to be blamed? I would blame the parents. I would blame the upbringing. If only they had been told to handle life, to accept life. Life has profit and loss. Life has pass and failure. You will fail exams. Accept it as a parcel of life. But it's because of your attachment you can't see your child failing. But yet if your neighbor's child fails, you will go and philosophize and say, no, I know you're brilliant, better. Never mind, better luck next time. You would go and philosophize, but with your own child, you can't handle it, isn't it? So this is a serious problem, and this is the modern situation everybody's handling, and it all boils down to how you are dealing with it, because you have not approached it in the right way. Because the pampering, you're given into the mind's demands, and with everything going your way, you will not be peaceful and happy. And sad to see it results in suicides.
Yeah, I think this is a really eye-opening conversation, as in, I think nobody really thinks that upbringing is responsible for, depression or anxiety in a child. But I guess in many ways, it really rings a bell that we have to teach children to see the larger picture of life, and not to put so much pressure on, every test that comes across, or every exam that, in case they don't do well, and really learn to be more resilient. I always believe that we learn more through no's, right? When life shows us a no, I think that's the time that we actually can learn. If we don't get overcome by it and we don't fall into hopelessness, it's really an opportunity for us to learn and grow. But for that broader spectrum of life, that vision of life should be there, so that we can lift ourselves and we can learn from the experience and move forward from there. And
Absolutely.
the other message I got from your conversation also was that if your child asks you for ice cream at 11 o'clock at night from across the town, learn to say no.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I really think it's a very good point also that a parent should, say no to their kids and not give in to their every whim and, desire, because that way they grow up thinking that the world is going to cater to them.
Yep.
Right, like how their parents do. And unfortunately the world doesn't work that way. And once you leave your parents' nest, you have to deal with life on your own, and then you expect life to cater to you, and when that doesn't happen, you don't know how to handle that. So a lot of focus should be on how we bring up the child with learning to say no, a little bit of sternness, or a little bit of not just giving into every whim.
In fact, is just preparing the child for what the facts of life are. What you
Correct.
What you see life, the reality is not what they are going through. So that disparity is what that creates a shock of life for them, and it comes at a very young age when they're not prepared to it, because you have not exposed that facts to them. We have not taught them how to live life, as simple as that.
Yeah.
We're not taught them the realities of life.
The dual side of life, the ups and the downs,
Yes.
Things that work and things may not work, and that's okay as well.
That's okay as well. Absolutely.
And we're just going into so how much freedom do you give your child, and how is freedom different from license?
See, a very good question. How much freedom do you give your child, and how is it different from being licentious? Now, every being on this planet Earth wants freedom. Have we all not tasted having lost our freedom or mobility, of being locked up at homes for the past 5-6 months? What has that created on the minds of all of us? And it is during those moments, have we not seen certain freedom experienced by the animal kingdom?
Right.
Isn't it? You find the animal kingdom have found themselves taking over our parks, our open areas, and they have moved freely because we have been confined. And there were so many pictures that were rolling by. Can you imagine how an animal is caged for rest of its life behind cages? So freedom and growth are, I would say, parallel. Growth is only possible where there is freedom. So as a parent, it is very imperative, very important that the parent gives as much freedom a child can get. Give as much freedom so that the child can express itself. But then the natural concern or the worry is, what happens if you give all the freedom? Now, that is what we are talking about. When freedom is not punctuated with discipline, it becomes licentious. You ought to have
formula.
Another formula. It is very, very rational. It's very scientific. It's very
scientific.
It is very, very logical in its approach. It is not out of my own mind I'm producing all this. It's all established truths, which are very rational truths. So freedom without discipline leads to licentious. Licentiousness is dangerous. You have license to do anything you want. My God, that's pretty dangerous, isn't it? So parents must understand the difference between freedom and license. And the discipline, what sets the discipline is the standards you have set. If you have led a life of certain discipline, that becomes the perfect role model for the child to emulate.
Again, the parents.
It is. In fact, we can't delegate transformation of the child to schools or education institutions or outside. In fact, it all begins with a parent, isn't it? So you can't delegate it to say, oh, I'm sending my child to the best day school. And what is the mother doing? Busy following her passions. No, as a mother, you have to do a certain sacrifice to be available for the child. It's not all the time the child grew up with caretakers, isn't it? You must be a role model. No sooner the child will be confused, who is my mother? You see that? So the difference between freedom and license is very important. So when freedom is punctuated with discipline, what is the equation? Am I right, Shailaja?
Correct.
Freedom, when it is not punctuated discipline, becomes licentious. When freedom is punctuated discipline, it is no problem. Like we all have the freedom to drive. You can take your car and go wherever you want to go. But the moment you get into a car, your every move is punctuated with discipline, with rules and regulations. There are certain things you do, certain things you cannot do. And those are the rules, those are the disciplines which you have the freedom to go. Nobody to question where you want to go. But when you go, follow the rules and disciplines in one's life. But if you look at life, you find the Western world are very, very licentious.
Correct.
They have, in the name of freedom, they have become licentious. And the Eastern community is very, very rigid, very conservative, very almost policing every move of yours. And that creates a sense of frustration. When a child doesn't get the freedom, it gets frustrated. And when that frustration starts mounting, a child either becomes a vegetable or a rebel. They're two products of unnatural molding of a child. When you deal unnaturally, a child either becomes a vegetable or a rebel. They become passive, dead to the world, or they start revolting, they start rejecting to every thought and idea that you present them. It's a boomerang. I know parents who come and tell me, parents are saying, I am not able to live in my home. My home has become a hell. My child doesn't listen to any word I say. It is just an argument short of a fist fight. Isn't that a sad state? How unnatural. Anything, if it is not accepted, anything is not natural, will be rejected. If it has to be accepted, it has to be natural. Now, anything that is not accepted by your system is rejected, isn't it? If you eat anything contaminated, you vomit, you throw it out. It is not accepted, it's not natural. Even if there's a speck of dust particle that goes into your eye, unknowingly, the eye instantly starts watering to get it out of it, isn't it? Okay. So when a child is rebellious to you, it becomes an expression of non-acceptance. That means you are not giving the necessary freedom for the child. So that's the difference between freedom and license. So you've got to draw a line between the extremities of the West and the extremities of the East. There's a middle path, there's a medium. We got to strike.
So we have this comment here from Ravi Venkatachalam, and he says, Vinay Ji, licentious of Western culture has caught up with our Eastern regions too lately. And we have Nitya who's asking, how does one agree or come to a common ground if parents disagree with the discipline of the child? That's another one on discipline.
How to come to a common ground when the disagree. See, you must first and foremost, you cannot bulldoze a child with your superiority, Nitya. You cannot bulldoze with your authority as a parent or an authority as a superior. You have to respect them as a human being who has an individual personality, individual emotions, individual thoughts. At best, you can only rationalize with a child. You cannot chain the child, you can't cage the child, you can't compel the child or force the child to do something which the child doesn't agree with. Now, you got to only appeal to the reason. The problem is we have been over counseling all the while, therefore they are not receptive to the ideas. So my advice to you is, in fact, the best way of advising a child is to be an indirect advice. It is never a direct, because the moment you say a child to say do it, it will exactly do the opposite. That is the reverse psychology. I'm sure you all have experienced. When it say a child not to do it, it will do it. When you say a child to do it, it will not do it. That is the very nature of the mind. So having approached it unnaturally over a long period of time, they become rebellious. They don't agree with you. So all what you got to do is reason with the child and leave it at that. Just because you reason with it, that doesn't mean he must agree to it. Leave it at that. Perhaps they will appreciate your point of view. But the best way is to give an indirect advice. To say, if I were you, I wouldn't do that. And leave it at that. Rather than saying, better do it. See, that backlashes. So you need to have enormous objectivity and patience and give the role and responsibility and the onus to the child so that the child can decide for himself or herself what's the right thing. I said in the very beginning, it takes 14, 15 years for the child to develop the mind and intellect. Ultimately, you want to give that ability to decide for the child, make the child self-sufficient, and you got to do that from a very young age. If you keep on imposing, the child starts becoming rebellious. But if you keep telling a child, if I were you, I would do this. And the child constantly notices what standards you're living, what your standards you're setting, what is your choices, how you have lived your life. You become a role model on the backdrop. And when you give it as a matter of choice and say, I would do this, it will have a great influence in the child's mind to consider your view. Even after doing your best, if the child doesn't follow your advice, you've got to respect and accept it as the child's choice. You have no say. You can't force the child, can we? Do you own them? As I've said in the beginning, you and I don't own them. They are individual beings with their own personalities. All what we got to do is show them the way and also lead the way.
I think this answers Shweta Mohan's question also, how to deal with a stubborn child. And also Mini has asked how to deal with the child's tantrum philosophically. So I think dealing with the child, rationally appealing to reason, I think all of that can go into that. So parents with teenage children, what about? I'm just going through the questions to see if we can just quickly take a couple before we end this.
I think Lopa Mehta also says anxiety and depression as a result of upbringing. I think we have said that, isn't it, Shailaja?
Yeah, I think we went over that. Yeah. So there are also questions. What role does faith play in a parent-child relationship? How to identify talent? Are parents matured enough to find that talent?
Oh, yes. So, as a parent, you should have a certain approach of identifying a talent. You need to be guided through it. And sadly, we are not taught. Therefore, we don't know. Many parents don't even know that there's something like this that exists. So I am born into a business family. I have a flourishing business. It becomes natural that my son must come out of a business school and just take over the business. It's just natural. You never understand that the child has an independence, has a different personality. He can choose photography as a profession. Nothing to do with business. No, but your question is, does photography make livelihood? That is not the question of whether you can make your livelihood or not, whether you are choosing something which you are designed for. So all this has to be very carefully taught to parents. We are not talking of children here. We're talking of being taught to the parents so that they can identify. It starts at a young age and you start carefully looking into it. I can't give it because it's, as I said, it's a 2-week process how you go through it, but hopefully something can come your way where this technique or this approach, this Vedic approach, can help you understand how to bring out or identify the hidden dharma of a child. Yes,
So if I
Shailaja.
may interrupt you here, Vinay Ji is holding a workshop on parenting that's going to come to you soon. So just keep in touch with the Wisdom Foundation, or keep in touch with the details which we will be displaying on the slide at the end of the talk. So there's going to be more stuff on parenting. Like I always say, I think this is the job most of us are just thrust into without, absolutely any knowledge. So it's really good to get some information. So there's Lakshmi Narayan here who says, do you also believe that sometimes foster parents can be better than biological parents? What is your take on that?
You may be very angry with me, you may differ with me, but have you ever looked at orphans? They are the best. They have no interference, nobody playing the role of what is the word I used earlier? Nobody
Nobody conditioning them.
nobody bombarding them, nobody. Yeah,
Yes.
So
The
I
less
would
parents
say,
are involved
you
in their
know,
children's lives, the better it
I
is.
would say the less a parent interferes with the child, that much well a child evolves. So maybe your thinking is right. See, the best way to influence a child's thinking is to be a role model. That's the best role a child can play. Just be a role model. Just be there so that the child can look up to you. Wait until the child can come up to you and seek your advice. Be a beacon of light for them to follow. Don't impose yourself by interfering into their lives, and start deciding for them how they should lead, what they should and what they shouldn't. So if one does that, I think in fact, you become rather a very powerful observer. When look at the psychology of life, when you know that you're being watched, don't you behave yourself? When you know that there are cameras there, you're being watched, you instantly become conscious of yourself. When you know there is presence of police, don't you become conscious of your actions? Similarly, when children know that there is a very powerful self-governed, self-disciplined individual as a leader, as a parent, and his presence is felt, the child automatically behaves himself or herself. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to use the cane to correct a child. In fact, using of a cane is only a result of frustration, suppression, and you have failed as a parent. That's when you resort to physical force to make a child follow. So it is the failure of a parent that results in that. So just be a silent observer, be a witness, and let your actions speak than your words.
I think that was really beautiful. And if I have one takeaway from this whole conversation, I think it would be this, that, be a role model, right? So parents hear this and know that we really can't get away from it. Whatever we want to instill in our child, whatever behavior, whatever attitude, whatever, emotional state as well, we have to embody that first, and we have to, live that life that we want our children to have. So there's really no getting away from that. So we
Absolutely.
have to be, so we have to be what we want our children to emulate. Many questions here. Does past lives karma affect the child in his present life's behavior pattern?
I would
And
say no. I would not go beyond what is known, because past is an unknown realm. So why are you going into the realm of unknown? It's best to deal with what you have got with.
correct.
Past certainly influences, but you do not know what the child has done in the past birth. So, but what you have is what you see, and how you deal with it is how you make of it. So
Deal with things as they are.
yes.
Yeah. And then there's Shubhashri, who also says that comparison of positive and negative things is equally wrong on children, which again I think is a very good point, because a lot of, I think, comparison really kills joy. So, and this is a big thing among adults as well, but among children as well. Why can't you be like this child? This child got so many marks, you didn't get it, right? This child got this job here. So I think we really have to, refrain from that. We only succeed in, lowering our child's self-esteem and self-confidence, and, make them feel unworthy about themselves in the process.
The best thing, Subhashri, glad you did mention that, but I would have wanted to mention it's a very important quality which parents err on, which is to constantly compare and create a complex in a child. Everyone is beautiful innately. Is for you to identify and bring it out. Don't compare and pressurize the child and make complexes. Don't create the complexes in a child. Just the child be what he or she is. So that's very, very important. So,
like I say, I think it goes back to the second takeaway from this whole conversation, right? About how parents have to accept children for what they are, right? With their own innate swadharma and vasanas, and not pile on our expectation on the child and mess up the child in the process. So again, that I think will, if we don't, hold them to some standard, imaginary standard, then we won't put so much pressure on them to be like somebody else either.
Absolutely.
And Shubhashri also says boys and girl teenagers are different, depends on how we handle them.
Yes, each one has their own nature. So you have to take that appropriate measurement and deal with them. They have the different natures.
So Ravi Venkatachalam says how to generally deal with a difficult child, teenager, or young adult. I think that goes into your conversation that you mentioned earlier, right? About talking to them, dealing with them at a rational level, try to reason with them.
You cannot
being a model.
You cannot, yes, certainly be a role model, and you cannot allow your frustration to come into your relationship with them. The child has become difficult because of the unnatural way of upbringing a child. So we have to take a certain credit or take certain responsibility or take certain account of how we have dealt with molding a child. So it is also a product of, a child is often can be compared to a mold of clay. Now it's up to the potter how he goes about molding that clay into a pot. So the role and responsibilities on the parent, how you mold the child. But it comes fresh in hand. But there could be children with certain deficiencies and shortcomings, but you got to accept with that, and that you can make wonders of it. And as just before I entered the class, a message came across my way of two pictures of a very poor girl in a very impoverished background in a village, and then a lady. I didn't know the lady name. She is I think one of the French ministers. So how two different, same girl, what she was from a very poor background, she became, I think, the education minister of France, something to that effect. I can't recall it, but so it is you can't blame situations and circumstances, how you make it, what you make of it. So as parents, we got to be accepting that there's a lot of shortcoming in the way we are molding our children, rather than putting all the blame on the children all the time.
Correct. I think that would be my third point here. Like, as parents, we have to take responsibility for our children as well, right? So I always say children are really a reflection of, what we've done with them in many ways, right? So like you say, it's true. The easy thing is to always blame the child, or the difficult child, stubborn child, right, bad child. But we really have to look at how we have, our attitudes, what we have put in and, done to create, a child with this kind of a nature and attitude, because they come completely innocent and they come completely pure, and we are the ones who do this to them. And we have to take responsibility for that. I think taking responsibility is a huge thing, because we always like to pass the buck, right? We always like to blame somebody else. And this, I was going to wind this up, but this again, I think is a really important question on what can be done to improve the child's self-esteem, especially at teenage levels. My friend Lopa Mehta is also in the education field. I mean, I think she's a teacher herself. So,
yeah. See, I think a lot can be done, but firstly and foremost, it's for you to identify what is the very nature of a child,
Correct.
And make the child believe that there is that potential in it, and not bringing any other unnatural element in the process of molding the child. So the factors which have tarnished the image, the mental image, has to be cleansed. So you need to do a lot. You need to undo a lot in the way we deal with children. And if children are left to themselves, as I've said, give them the freedom. And if we give them the freedom and just give as less and little advice as possible, and be there as role models, I think a lot can be done. The one of the fundamental principles as parents we violate, and this is resulting in a backlash from children, is the principle of education. Is knowledge is always taken, it is never given. And we violate as parents. We constantly keep sermonizing, advising, giving them. And that also, the kids are trying to fit into your expectations. You're never allowing themselves to be what they are and let them express themselves. So the less a parent interferes, but be an observer, a witness, and set the right standards, it will give all the necessary inspiration and motivate a child to come out of their shell and bring the best out of what's the hidden talent is. So you've got to give them the opportunity and the environment. And as parents, I appeal, please, let's less interference in them. The less we interfere, the better it is for them. Now, I talk as a parent. It is always a challenge with all this knowledge. It is a challenge. I certainly accept it, but I just can't understand how can people deal without this knowledge. That just baffles me. Life is challenging with the knowledge. How can life can be without this knowledge? May God be with you.
Yeah, so I think some very important points here, going back to the takeaways from here. Parents have to recognize the child and accept the child for what the child is, with the child's own unique strengths. And I think as a parent, if we focus on the child's strength and not keep focusing on another child's strength and comparing this child with that child, I think confidence naturally grows when the child feels like they're good at something, or this is what they're about, or this is their strength, right? So I think the onus again is on parents to really develop their children's strengths and to focus on their strengths and make them feel they're good enough without constantly comparing them with other children. Easier said than done, but I think intellectually that is the path. So I think we really need to wind this up. It's almost 1 hour and 18 minutes. So I just, Vinay Ji, I want, this is a very personal question, which I wrote in the last minute. I didn't send this question to you. So this is a personal question. Can you share like 2 or 3 things that you have learned along the way in your own parenting journey? So Vinay Ji has a daughter who is, how old is she now?
15.
15? Yeah.
So all I would say is not how much as we preach, is all how much I can let it translate in my own life. So this knowledge is a beautiful manual, and if I can live by the manual given by the Vedas, and if I strive to be a role model to my child. And I must say, there's a long way to go. Therefore, I always want to be a student of this knowledge, and let my actions influence her, and let my actions influence others, not my words. So this is very difficult to take out 1 or 2, but all I try to sincerely imbibe is to have this eternal wisdom, get myself soaked in this wisdom, so that let it speak through my actions and let it resonate through all what I do. And if I'm able to do all what I want my child to do it, let me do it myself and let me live by it, and let that be a role model for her. And in spite of that, if she chooses a path for herself, I duly respect and honor whatever she chooses, because each one has their own personality, So, but I have surrendered myself to this eternal wisdom and let it pave the way how I play all the roles. Parenting is just one such role, but I would like to be far beyond a parent. I would like to be a perfect human being, and then let it reflect in all the various roles I play. So, sorry if I did not give out one or two points which you are looking at, but
No. I think you spoke brilliantly and perfectly, and it's exactly actually what you have been speaking of through this whole conversation, right? Right from the beginning, word go about when parenting starts. You said that it began even before the child, is in the womb, and where we begin to work on ourselves as individuals and human beings. So, I think very well encapsulated, and I would not have expected anything out of you. So I'm just going to wind this up, but I really want to, maintain the gist of this conversation because it is so important, and only by focusing on, what we got out of this can we take something away. Otherwise, an hour-long conversation, and we kind of, wind up with, okay, what was that really about? So I think some of the key aspects that Vinay really brought up was that we should work on ourselves, right? It's a constant process. So whether we are parents or not, parenting is one role, but the whole journey of life is really about working, on ourselves and based on the scriptures, based on the Vedas to become this perfect human. While being perfect is maybe an ideal, but we must not, lower the ideal to what is, our situation right now, and we have to keep working to evolve. Be a role model, right? That's another huge takeaway. Be a role model, right? Through our own actions, like Vinay said, we have to really embody and personify what we want our children to do. Like, there's no point in telling our children one thing and doing something else. So, if we want our kids to exercise, we have to get up and go out there. If we want our kids to, be knowledgeable and, learn the scriptures, then we got to do that ourselves, right? So, whatever you want your kids to do it yourself, right? That would be my second huge takeaway from here. And I think another huge thing is accept your child for who he or she is. Right? More often, we're always trying to fit the child into our own mold of what we want our child to be. So, and that results in really, I truly believe, lack of self-esteem, lack of confidence. All of this comes from that non-acceptance from the parent, because the parent is like the first person that the child interacts with, and the children can sense, right, if the parent feels disappointed in the child, or the parent feels like the child is not living up to his standard. So really learn to, and this is not just lip service, but from the heart, accept the child for the child's own unique personality, mold the child's strengths so that the child can really shine. And I think it's more than acceptance. I guess we celebrate our child for who he or she is. And I think another important thing is also learn to say no to the child occasionally.
absolutely.
Right? So the
But
child
all,
learns when knows,
yes,
when universe
absolutely.
says no in terms of relationships. I mean, this world we live in is so impermanent, right? Relationships end, jobs end, careers end. It's the time when nothing really goes according to plan per se, but the
Yes.
ability to be flexible, right, to be able to be resilient, I think is so important, to be able to accept whatever change that life brings without getting crushed beneath it, right? So
Shailaja,
learning
if I
to
can say
accept
one
and grow
thing,
is very
if, if I can say one thing, as a parent, the
important.
best thing a parent can give to the child is to give this manual how to live life. Just give them the manual how to live life. And sadly, we don't do that, and thereby all these challenges and shortcomings come up. So, and it's so lovely interacting and seeing so much participation. There is a huge demand for this kind of a workshop on parenting. I think, Shailaja, you did mention, didn't you, before?
I did.
So there is
Yeah.
a great request for a workshop like this. Perhaps if you can reach us, and in a world where we are interconnectable, doesn't matter geographically where we are placed, we can always take up this various aspects, and there's a lot more to it. As Shailaja said, 1 hour is a short time, but we could take it up and explore through an exclusive workshop. Would be lovely to connect with you all on that topic someday.
Yeah, so wind this up. Vinay Ji will be conducting a workshop on parenting. It would be nice if you all Wisdom Foundation page as well as Vinay Ji Kumar. I can always contact with him. And also, they had mentioned that Vinay Ji is announcing his North American lecture series. Yeah, just a few seconds. Yeah. So this is the slide for the North American lecture series, Eternal Wisdom, A Manual to Life. So it is the essence of various scriptural texts distilled into an unmissable interactive 5-part online lecture series. And the details are here for people who would like to connect with Vinay Ji. The email address, everything is written
I
here
think
on the slide. So please take note.
Shailaja, something is covering up the email ID. Can the screen be magnified?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that okay now?
Yes. I
So
think
that's
now we can see it.
info@wisdomfoundation.co.in. Yeah, again, info@wisdomfoundation.co.in or bgelearning@gmail.com. Right? So the information is here on your slide. And maybe we can just show the other slide as well. Vinay Ji continues to have classes, regular classes, wisdom discourses, Bhagavad Gita, as well as Bhajagovindam. Again, you can just email him for information. The email address is the same, info@wisdomfoundation.co.in. So just, stay in touch, be in touch, and Vinay is always available. So with this, we are going to end our conversation today. Thank you all. I was actually telling Vinay Ji we have to wind up earlier and about how last time it became an hour and a half. But as always, this is such an interesting topic and there's so much to talk about it. Like Vinay Ji says, it's really hard to cram everything in an hour and 30 minutes, even though this is really a very long session. My longest sessions are with Vinay Ji. But do stay, because our topics are so intense, right? There's so much to speak and there's so much to discuss. So thank you everyone for your input, for your comments, for your suggestions, for your experience sharing as parents yourselves. Thank you so much, Vinay Ji, for your time. It's always a pleasure having these conversations with you, and I hope to have many more with you. And I'm really sorry about the interruptions in the Wi-Fi. Please bear with me. I think it was from my side, and I hope to fix that. So thank you, everyone. Good night, and remember the takeaways.
Namaskaram. Lovely connecting, Shailaja. Hari Om.
Namaste.
Namaskar.